So, hello and welcome. I'm Anna Halliday. I'm a member of the Brain Tank and an RA housing connection there, I guess. On behalf of University Housing, I welcome all of you to this evening's Community Conversations panel titled Dancing Across the Globe. The Community Conversation series is a living learning initiative of University Housing, co-produced by the students of the Oregon Brain Tank, which is an academic group in the residence hall. Tonight's evening was created by the students of the Oregon Brain Tank, which meets on Mondays at 12:30 p.m. in the Living Learning Center Ducks Bistro conference room, if anyone wants to stop by and participate that and produce panels like these. We would like to invite students who are interested in contributing to the development of the Community Conversation series to join the group or simply drop in for a visit and suggest a panel topic. We always welcome new ideas and would value your critical thinking and intellectual curiosity. I also wish to acknowledge our co-sponsors, the Robert D. Clark Honors College, the Oregon Humanities Center, Undergraduate Studies, and the UO Libraries, who have collaborated with University Housing for the past 9 years to make this series possible. Finally, we have comment cards available for you, and we would value your feedback about tonight's panel. So if you want to take a moment to fill one of those out, we'd really appreciate it. Also, our panel is set to conclude at 8:30, and I ask that you hold your questions until the last speaker has concluded the opening remarks. We have ample time for Q&A at the end. At this time, it is my honor to introduce our panel. We have Lisa Gilman, Program Director of Folklore Studies on this end. Angela Montague, she's a PhD candidate in Cultural Anthropology. And Carolina Caballero, a Fulbright Scholar who's a graduate student in getting her Master of Fine Arts in Dance. So if you could join me in welcoming our panel. We also have our library partner, Yen Tran, the undergraduate services librarian, who, in consultation with the panelists, has prepared an annotated bibliography, which we will be distributing this evening. And materials for this Community Conversations panel will also be on the web at the URL listed at the bottom of the bibliographies. And also, we don't have a date quite set yet, but we have an open invitation to tour the Eugene Ballet's Midtown Arts Center. So if any of you are interested in going on that tour, we're working on getting a date for that, and you can write your email down, and we'll let you know when that happens. So enjoy.
I volunteered to go first, but it looks like my image went away. Not entirely sure why.
Is it set?
It,
Only this one will work right now because they need audio. So if you want to unplug yours,
oh, okay.
oh, only this.
Gotcha. One more technical difficulty. So I'm in the anthropology department, and I am working on a music festival outside of Timbuktu called the Festival in the Desert, or Le Festival au Désert. It's in West Africa. And I was just going to talk a little bit about how I got interested in performance and dance in Mali, by way of just kind of talking about how I got into anthropology. I'm going to try and be fairly brief, but I got into anthropology via a silversmithing class and actually hated it and had someone say, you should try an anthropology class, and I really liked it. But I did make jewelry, and I've also been a dancer most of my life, and have done choreography and whatnot. And through making jewelry, I started making it for sale, and I noticed that my relationship to my art form changed when I put it up for sale. And when I got into anthropology, I started wondering if that happened to other types of artists or performers around the world. And through anthropology, I decided to do a study abroad, and I did it in Mali, which is in West Africa, right there. Actually, let me get a better slideshow thingy going on. there. And I kind of entered into West Africa via this study abroad, and then I met some Tamashek speakers who are called Touareg, who I'd also loved their jewelry, and had hoped to kind of do a project based on the commodification of Touareg art forms. What ended up happening wasn't necessarily that, but what I'll talk about today is kind of how a certain performance has kind of two different undertakings. But to start out, so my question was kind of like, what happens when you commodify culture? What happens when a culture or an art or performance piece becomes something you can buy? And I decided to take as my kind of unit of analysis tourism, because I think tourism is a great place to kind of look at culture for sale. And there's a couple theories that are tossed around in anthropology in terms of what happens when culture is for sale. And one of the theories is that it destroys culture, that it's somehow an object that then becomes destroyed. Now, I did notice when I was making jewelry and then started selling it that I started hating it. So I thought, well, that kind of makes sense, right? If you sell something, somehow it changes your relationship to it. So my initial reaction when I was looking at tourism literature was, yeah, that makes sense. Destroys culture. Tourism is going to destroy culture. Then I read some other things that said that it was like neo-colonialism, because when outsiders came to view a culture, that it created this relationship where the outsider was like a colonizer, and created these relationships where people were on display kind of for the benefit of these outsiders. When I got to Mali and started asking questions, what I found in the context of tourism is that they looked at it as economic opportunity. Mali is almost half dry Saharan desert. It's where the fabled city of Timbuktu is. In the south, you can kind of tell it's a topographical kind of map, or whatever kind of map you call this. You can kind of see it's greener in the south, and so things grow. But specifically for the group of people that I was working with, who live in the Sahara Desert, it very much was an economic opportunity, because they didn't have much that would grow, and salt caravans weren't very lucrative anymore. And so that kind of got me thinking, because I assumed, and I don't know how many of you also have assumed this, but I assumed that most places the locals hate the tourists. That was just an assumption that I had, and when I've been here, say in Oregon or other places, that is something that I heard, is that I hate it when the tourists are here. But my experience in Mali was that they loved the tourists and wanted to bring more in, and basically a lot of business models were kind of set up with this sell culture. It's a renewable resource, and you'll never run out of culture. So it was looked at as economic opportunity. What I also found was that there was a lot of local interpretation going on, and some theorists have put forth the idea that there's actually two stages in any touristic encounter, and I did definitely find this through my work on the festival, that in terms of the dance performance that I was looking at and the different performances, there was kind of a ritual or a traditional stage that the random tourist is not going to happen upon, and then there was kind of the tourist stage, and this is where the performance took place. I chose to show a picture of Dogon mask dancers because they're some of the most well-known Malian performers, at least until the Tuareg rock band Tenday won a Grammy this year. They may be supplanting the Dogon, but this mask troupe has actually performed on the Mall at the Smithsonian and has traveled quite a bit. And an anthropologist that worked with this particular dance troupe kind of came from the same place that I did, and I'm forgetting her name, which sucks. But what she asked was, is this performing for outsiders destroying the meaning of it? Because it's supposedly a ritual dance. It's supposed to be sacred. It's supposed to only happen every 4 years, but it's happening like 4 times a day. And what she found is that they contextualized their dance, that when it was a ritual, that it was done for that ritual, and it was different. It was geared towards locals. Also, all culture changes, which if you've taken an anthropology class, we drill this into you, that culture really can't be destroyed because culture is adaptable. And we can definitely see this in terms of performance in the Malian context as well as other contexts, I believe, that everything kind of changes. So, as I said, I worked in West Africa. The group that I am most interested in are the Touareg, and the name they call themselves are the Kel Tamashek, which means the people who speak Tamashek, and they live in Mali, Niger, Algeria, Libya, so basically the northern part of kind of Saharan Africa. And they've also moved into Burkina Faso and Mauritania because of political issues and violence and war that's broken out and is going on right now. And I don't even know where to begin with talking about that. There was a recent coup d'etat. They've been lauded in the past as an amazing example of an African democracy, and that kind of fell apart about 3 months ago. So we'll see what happens. The Tuareg are traditionally pastoral nomads, which means they move around with their herds of camel, goat, sheep. And largely because they live in the Sahara Desert, they move kind of with the seasons as well as other necessities. They've kind of moved to semi-nomadism until 1960s. I have no idea why that caste system thing is up there, but I won't edit while I talk. And they're largely becoming sedentary, which is unfortunate because this is something that, from talking to Tuareg in Mali, I again and again heard that their identity really rested on the idea of being nomadic. But that was also being kind of interpreted locally. I should have paid attention to it at the time. One thing I want to put out is, although I work with people who identify as Tuareg, that there's no single Tuareg culture, that culture changes, that there's going to be gender differences, there's going to be age differences, and then also they are traditionally or historically a caste-based society with nobles and chiefs at the top, and then they have a religious class that they are mostly Muslim, and so they have a religious class. Then the smith artisans who do, well, I'll talk about them in the next slide. And then a tributary class or a vassal class. And then also traditionally or historically they had slaves, but this has been outlawed and they no longer do this, though they are still incorporated within the system. And it's kind of complex if anyone wants to talk to me about it afterwards. What I'm going to look at specifically for this talk are the smith artisans because they are the ones who do most of the performance historically. This is changing. Another aspect of what I'm looking at is the changing relationship between these original or historical relationships and how they're changing on the global stage, because we're seeing people who, say, historically, like the nobles, looked down upon performance, but now are rock stars. And so to see kind of how things change on the global stage. Also, the smith artisans do a lot of the jewelry work and other types of work, metal work. They make amazing silver jewelry, leatherwork boxes and whatnot. And they sell a lot in the tourist market. What's happening is a lot of the smith artisans are becoming more wealthy than the nobles, and it's switching kind of their original relationship to each other, because they are still, in some ways, attached to a patron noble. And but their status differences are happening because of class. If anyone in here has heard of the griot tradition, which is common in West Africa, the smith artisans also kind of fall in that category, although they kind of ride this line between North and Sub-Saharan Africa. But they perform at courtship festivals, they do ritual praise, they engage in these kind of joking relationships that I won't have time to go into, but they also perform at weddings, naming ceremonies, and festivals as both singers and dancers. So dance on the local stage, what it would look like for these smith artisans. Most dance, uh-oh, I like moved or breathed or something. Did we lose another? Okay, I'll hold it up and say my own kind of words. So dance in terms of the local setting or the traditional, whatever you want to call it, or a ritual setting is done by smith artisans, and largely at weddings and courtship festivals, and it's also gendered. It's mostly women, though there is a men's sword dance, which some people have kind of contested, is it martial arts or dance, which I think is a very Western question in terms of gender. If men do it, it's martial arts. If women do it, it's dance. That's another conversation altogether. The Tenday in Tagbast is done often at festivals, and the Tenday is actually a drum that this woman here is drumming, and it's like a mortar that's used for grinding millet, and then they stretch a goat skin on it, and they do the percussion, and then men dance in front of it, both for the men's sword dance as well as the other ones. And then the females, besides drumming, also do some choral singing and chanting. There's also kind of an obscure dance that happens at festivals. It's called the Zaraf, and it's performed by a group of young women. They happen very spontaneously. The women someone will kind of initiate it and kind of grab a few other women from the wedding, for instance, or the festival goings on, and they'll do this 5-minute performance, and it's dancing. They kind of huddle with their, you can kind of see this woman has a type of veil, which is just a long sheet of fabric, and they kind of hold it up, creating a closed circle, and they kind of dance and chant, and then it's done and gone, very brief, and it's not accompanied by instruments. The last aspect is another dance that is done with the Tenday, and this is what I thought I'd focus on a little bit just for a minute or two. And that is the spirit possession dance, which is a form of trance dance that takes place usually for healing, and it's called the Tenday and Gumatan. The Tenday, again, is the drum, and then I'm trying to remember, I can't remember the name of the instrument. There's another instrument in the Gumatan where they tip a gourd upside down in a basin of water and hit it with a stick, and it makes this amazing kind of bass drum sound, and that also accompanies it. I think in terms of the Tenday, this is what the festival in the desert was based on, and so I'll get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to quickly overview spirit possession a little bit cross-culturally and some of the ways that it's been looked at. It's a dance. It usually incorporates dance as well as percussion, and there's even been researchers who have kind of gone cross-culturally and looked at the actual percussion or the rhythm and found similarities in a number of different settings, whether it be voodoo ceremonies in Haiti or in a Zar ritual in southern Sudan, and found that there's, in some cases, a particular percussion that happens while you're dancing to it that can actually alter brain states, and they believe that's where the trance comes from. That's an outsider kind of Edic perspective, as we say in anthropology. Find it interesting. A number of researchers have looked at spirit possession, which this is a fairly decent description. It's just a condition of being affected by forces or entities that are normally invisible and external to humans, and somehow changes people's reaction. Changes them in some way. It does tend to cross-culturally affect more women for whatever reason. It's very gendered, but men also in different contexts. Usually the spirits enter the bodies via organic or non-organic illnesses. So someone may be sick and becomes possessed, or enters possession kind of in a dream. Sudden allergies, so we could get this in Eugene right now, as everyone has seasonal allergies or aversions, right? It's awful. So just beware. Depression, which I think is very interesting, and this is one of the main ways that Touareg women specifically go into a possession ceremony. It's related to a kind of a depressed type state that we may recognize. The actual spirit that may possess an individual may be an ancestor or a mythical being, may be cultural heroes. In the Tamashek case or the Touareg case, possessed individuals are said to have an illness of heart and soul, and this is where it's kind of been interpreted as being kind of like a depression. And usually a family member or a close person will kind of call a spirit possession ceremony, and it's usually, there's basically two spirits that possess a person in general in Tuareg society, specifically in Malian situations that I've looked at. And it's either the Kelasuf, which are the people of solitude and believed to kind of live outside, kind of like a spirit or a ghost, or the El Jinin, which is relative to the Muslim jinn, which is kind of like a spirit. And theorists say that there's kind of two responses when somebody becomes possessed. Either they resist and then they go through an exorcism and make horrible horror movies about it, or there's an accommodation. I'm just trying to liven you guys up. Yeah. I feel like I'm talking to dead silence, but it's okay. Won't put you on the spot. An accommodation has to do with the host and kind of a therapeutic situation. So that somebody becomes possessed and then needs to somehow be healed. And this is where we get this mediumistic or divinatory healing that some people may become practitioners all the time. And it requires some kind of ritual, usually to summon a spirit. Some examples I put here, Haitian voodoo, or Korean, actually brought some slides from another lecture that I have done. Whoa, where am I? The Monsan, which is kind of roughly translated as Korean shamanism. And then the Zar ritual in northern Sudan. And if anyone's read Mama Lola, she was a voodoo priestess in New York and did ritual healing using voodoo spirits. Tuareg spirit possession, according to Susan Rasmussen, who is an ethnographer that I use a lot in my work, says that there's basically three forms of spirit possession. It's either therapeutic, which means it's some kind of healing, someone needs to be healed, or it's, quote, ludic, which there's, in Tuareg society, this joking relationship can happen where there's social commentary, and people that are possessed can kind of say things they couldn't normally say, especially between, say, lower castes to noble castes or something like that. So it's, and you find this in other situations as well, cross-culturally. This woman, Janice Body, and what is it? Laura Kendall has worked with the Monson, and she says that some of the things that happen in these spirit possession ceremonies for the shaman have allowed them to kind of take to task their gender depression and to kind of act out their sexuality or some kind of repression. And there's some of that in the Tuareg case as well. It's an outlet for maybe tensions. And then there's the aesthetic form. And I think this last form is really what leads it to become kind of for sale on the global stage. So what I'm looking at is the global stage through the festival in the desert, which happens outside of Timbuktu, Mali. And it's based on, thank you, I had no idea what time we started.
I think we started at like 5 or 10 after. So you're fine. Just
Oh, okay.
make sure that we have time for everybody else.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I didn't even look. So the festival happens outside of Timbuktu, Mali, and it's really based on the Tenday, both on kind of a secular as well as the healing aspect of the Tenday. There's also poetry contests and camel races, and it's also like a world music festival. So it's taking this kind of traditional ritual music and dance form and then putting it on the world stage. And like Bono showed up this year, and Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin came in 2003. And some performers have become globally successful. And a 10-day group actually kind of formed, has gotten popularity out of it, who, I should have put a picture of them. They're Tartit, T-A-R-T-I-T. And they kind of took the 10-day form, both the music and the dance form, onto the world stage. And one of the most popular on the global stage is this, see if I can make it happen, a men's sword dance. And it kind of gives you this idea that it's the women create the music, and then the men do kind of like a dance in front. This isn't the sword dance, but it's kind of a back and forth conversation between the men. And then I think it'll give you a fairly good picture of the women doing the hand clapping and the Tenday drum and the chanting. And then you'll see some tourists. And the camels. Lots of camels at the festival in the desert, if anyone ever wants to go. And I'll stop there, but if there's any questions, I can answer them. The photos were taken by a friend of mine, Vicente Mendez, who works for Fulani Travel as well, and some funding that I've gotten from the anthropology department, and Peace and Migration Award, and a SOF Award. So thank you.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm still working on my English, so please feel free to correct my pronunciation and things, or any sense that doesn't, sentences that doesn't make any sense. So, so I'm a grad dance student at the Department of Dance here at the university, and as Anne said at the beginning, I'm also a Fulbright Scholar, and that means that my experience or my immersion into the dance field has been a little bit different from the rest of the grad students, I could say. So I don't have a background in dance, but I'm a psychologist, and when I was studying psychology, I was always interested in this tension, or in my case, this location between my own body and the social body, or the social idea of what bodies were supposed to be. So I was interested in how in the importance of the body in our identity processes. How it's important not just to talk about the body, but like be in our bodies and be a body, like more in a more holistic way. So when I was finishing my degree, I started just taking dance classes, and then I got in love with the practice of dance, and then I discovered that also the dance is not just a practice, but also a discourse that that can help to read and also transform bodies, and so people and identities. So yeah, that has been kind of my my path, and I also got involved in a project back in Colombia, and it's about integrating people with and without disabilities through dance. So while we were offering these dance workshops, I was also researching what was happening with the people and interviewing people, and how important was to have a body experience between these two populations that we tend to segregate, but at the end it's just like the same, like maybe different places in a spectrum of the human possibilities. So, so being here and a student in the dance department, I have been interested in finding more ways of expand this idea of making dance like a diverse field of knowledge and representations. And last year during the fall term, I had the opportunity to take an independent study with Professor Priscilla Ovalle, and she has wrote this book which is called Dance and the Hollywood Latina, Race, Sex, and Stardom. And then she analyzes 5 Latina stars that had made it like be a real star in Hollywood. And then she analyzes how these the Latinas have kind of being represented by this brown body. So this racial in-betweenness between the blackness and whiteness, and how this kind of light image that we always see about Latinas is actually a very complex image of racial and hierarchical tensions in the process of the United States being a nation, and also the United States having relationships with other countries, and in this case, Latin America. So when I read this, I was kind of surprised, and it made me more aware of my ethnic and cultural background. So I was like, well, I'm a Latina and I'm a dancer, and actually what she says in the book is that a big part of the Hollywood Latina, it's a big element or aspect of this myth of being a star in Hollywood has to do with Latinas being dancers. So we have been always portrayed as bodies in motion, and then she analyzes how dance has helped to kind of crystallize this myth of the Latina. And maybe that's not a problem at all, because it's kind of nice to be portrayed as dancers and natural dancers, I guess. But the problem of what I see problematic in there is that the body has been sexualized and commodified.
Mm-hmm.
So as a second year student, I'm also in the process of writing my prospectus. So I had to decide for a subject in which to write my thesis or make my movement project. And our thesis at the dance department, if anyone is interested, it's you choose a subject, and there are different ways to go, but it's a movement project, so we have to choose any subject, but then do it in practice, like not just to research about it, but like do something with it. So so now I'm in the construction of that project, and what I said that I'm going to do is, and maybe I'll just read it to you because it'll be easier for me. So my thesis project will be called, I expect it to be called Dancing Identities, Debunking the Latina Myth. And this movement research project aims to explore and reflect upon Latina identity, particularly on the dominant and stereotypical images that circulate in American popular culture. I will conceive and craft a trilogy to be presented as a dance concert at the Department of Dance. So I hope that happens next year during the winter or the spring term. So my inquiry is based on Priscilla Sovage's book, Dance and the Hollywood Latina, in which she examines how a century of cinematic representations of Latina women as natural dancers have played an important role in the construction of a popular myth that has signalized their brown bodies with racial ambiguity, sexual and other connotations. The concept behind this project is to disrupt and subvert existing stereotypical representations from popular culture by looking at my own identity as a Latina. In the United States, it is undeniable that Hollywood and the mass media dominate a hegemonic view of what Latinas are. By using the kinesthetic and symbolic power of dance, these means have evoked images of either a diminished ethnic other or have displayed the sexiness of the brown body, suggesting that Latinas are inherently both passionate and promiscuous. As a Latina and as a dancer, I have been forced to confront my own identity. While I cannot state that I have suffered from open discrimination in the Department of Dance, it is obvious that I'm a foreigner, and that my presence represents difference within the predominant white, mostly American context in which the dance program takes place. Because of the physiognomy of my own body and the context in which I now live and create art, I know I cannot escape the symbolic meanings with which I'm being perceived. Therefore, as a psychologist and a dance artist, I feel compelled to critically explore such hegemonic and dominant assumptions about Latina identity. So my interest in dance goes beyond the Latina myth as an entertainment act of pleasure and male seduction. My immersion into the dance field has been guided by a desire to recover and highlight the importance of the body in the construction of our subjectivities. In my investigations, I have come to realize that our identities are in a continuous tension and negotiation between our social and individual identities, and that dance is a field of knowledge and expression that allows the exploration of such tensions. This view has been enriched and complemented by my professional work with people with disabilities, which I also consider an important aspect that complements my identity as a Latina. My goal in this research is to advocate for postmodern or contemporary dance as the means to explore, disrupt, or destabilize, I don't know. Destabilize such images. I practice those words, but it never worked out.
They're hard for a native English speaker.
Yeah. The intention underlying this journey inquiry is by extension to reveal some insights about the politics of the female body that exists in contemporary dance. This is based on Elizabeth Dempster's arguments that the postmodern is not a newly defined dance language, but a strategy and a method of inquiry which challenge and interrogate the processes of representation itself. On the other hand, Jane Wolfe claims that dance can only be subversive when it questions and exposes the construction of bodies in culture. Otherwise, this practice, long associated with being a woman's activity, would remain problematic, since the female body has always been a site of oppression and repression in our Western culture. When the operations and actions of the body, she says, are made clear, that is, the body itself is the subject of inquiry, the author explains the body can indeed provide a site for radical cultural politics. On the other hand, there is little literature on Latino identity within the dance field of studies. Since Latina or Latino dance has been at the margin of mainstream trends within the modern dance tradition. Dance historian Sally Baines states that the analysis of pursuing identity in dance, in this case of Latina identity, challenges the master narratives and myths of homogeneity in American culture, as well as the specific discursive practice of mainstream dance. Therefore, the significance of my study is to create art that questions hegemonic and dominant discourses of representation of the dancing female body, particularly that of Latinas in American popular culture. I will also, in my process, I will also explore and investigate choreographic and collaborative art-making processes that foster difference and diversity on dance concerts. Agreeing with Wolfe's arguments, I also think that it's present to create and provide contextualized representations of the body that defy such dominant discourses. Therefore, I will create 3 dance pieces that intend to show other bodies and celebrate diversity on a stage. By inquiring about my own identity, I expect to explore and question these ways of representing the female dancing body as a predominantly white, thin, young, and able-bodied. My intention would be to dispel myths and move away from the stereotypes associated with bodies and with the general assumption that Latina dancers are merely interested in Latin ballroom rhythms and in performing the commodification of the sexualized body. So I said that I will create like a trilogy of dances, and my idea is to create a solo on me in order to explore this this first idea of the myth that Latinas are natural dancers. And because one part of the myth is sort of true. I mean, I did grow up in a culture that the dance in different contexts, not just like in the studios and training for like choreographers and so, but like with the family in any birthday celebration or anything like that. And I think that that's something that I can deny in my own body, my own history, but I can also just attribute the fact that I'm a dancer to like just being part of that culture, because I have been training for the last 10 years really hard to make it up to this point. So my idea is to maybe be able to fuse these two vocabularies that I have in my body and kind of maybe expand a little bit more the modern vocabulary that with which we are trained here at the dance department. And the second piece, I'm thinking in explore a concept that Obaje states in her book, and which I think is really interesting, and it's this notion of in-betweenness, in which the brown body is. So I'm thinking in working with black bodies and white bodies, and just to play with the idea of a stereotypical image movement associated. So and kind of see if because somebody has a black body necessarily like has this African dance movements inscribed in their own bodies or history. It could be that that person just happened to be like born here and never really have contact with African dances. So, and actually, just recently, my peer Liana Conyers, she was supposed to be here actually. Her project was about black art, and it's also like a critical look at what is that, and just because she has a black body doesn't mean that she does black art or black dance. So it's a very interesting question, and then also just because you have a white body, that means that you just do ballet or whatever. So I'm interested in showing this racial also background that I have, because as Latina, I'm also aware of my of the mixed about the mix of my race. Like we were colonized by Spanish people, but also some people from Africa came with them in that process, and then we were also indigenous. So I'm a very mixed race. So I think that's also very interesting, just for me. And then my third piece has to do with what I think, I believe in life, and so I'm interested in working with people from different ethnic backgrounds. And at the department we have some international students, but also I'm interested in inviting people with disabilities, so I can also show that that's also part of my research interests. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll have more after the summer next year, and if you have more questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Is it your bag? Is that your phone? Maybe it was responding to you. It was applauding you and supporting you as you went along. All right, so I'm Lisa Gilman. I'm a professor and the director of the folklore program, also in the English department and African Studies, Women's and Gender Studies affiliated faculty. And I'm going to just show you a bunch of video. I do research in Malawi, which is, thanks, I realized I should have a map up when I saw your nice map. So we're going to have Google help us out here. I do research in Malawi, which is often confused with Mali, which is where Angela does research. Do not make that mistake.
Which is often confused with Bali, which is in Indonesia.
Yeah, I've had a lot of mail sent to a lot of interesting places. So Mali is up here, and where Angela is talking about is up in northern Mali. Malawi is so tiny that it doesn't even show up on the map there. There it is. So Malawi is in southern Africa. It's sometimes identified as southern, central, eastern Africa. I call it south, central, eastern Africa. And I have been doing research in Malawi since, I don't know, about, I think if I do this, it gets closer, right? Since about I guess I went in the summer of 95 when I was a graduate student, and then I went back in the summer of 96, and then I lived there from 98 through 2000 for 2 years, and then I wrote my dissertation on it and have since published a lot on my research in Malawi, and I'm delighted that I'll be spending much of next year there. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about dances in Malawi, but I'm going to really focus it on my own research, and specifically on research I did in 98, 99. Malawi, as like the United States, there's a lot of different kinds of dance practices that happen. And one of my kind of agendas in life is that when people think about African dance, they often, well, I should specify that. When Americans think about African dance, they often have kind of, thanks to National Geographic, they have images of people in grass skirts kind of participating in rituals, which certainly happens. There are those kinds of dance practices, but in Malawi, as in most African countries, the majority of dance practices aren't necessarily associated with rituals, and people don't wear grass skirts very often. And so the dances I'm going to show you are dances that in Malawi are categorized as traditional dances, but also as secular. So they're not associated with religion, but they're done in a lot of different kinds of contexts. So if you were to go to Malawi as any of you, and you went to the cities, and you have the big cities of Lilongwe and Blantyre, which are very cosmopolitan cities, you would go to clubs and dance, and you would dance to all different kinds of music. You would dance to popular Malawian music. You might dance to popular Malawian music. Malawi's been, because of its political history, has been slower to kind of establish its own musical aesthetic, and so they've done a lot of borrowing. So a lot of the local bands play kind of reggae-type music. There is kind of a Malawian sound. There's a lot of influence from the Congo, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is up here. But then there's also a lot of other kinds of contexts in which dance happens. So dance happens at weddings. It happens in, for some of the ethnic groups, it happens at funerals. It happens at installations of chiefs. It happens at various rituals. It happens, there's a whole scene in a lot of different ethnic groups in Malawi of young people participating, dancing in teams. It's a lot like competitive sports. So a village will have a team, and then that village competes with the teams of other villages, and then there's ideas of winners and losers, and it's something that young people do, and it's really quite fun, and that's what I'm going to show you. What I'm going to focus on is I'm going to show you, basically I'm just showing you video, as I said. I'm going to show you 3 different dance forms, and they are, should we go back to my map? They are all so throughout Malawi, as with any African country, there's a lot of different ethnic groups, and each ethnic group has its own language, its own cultural practice, its own social system. And where I did a lot of my research is in northern Malawi, right about here, in a little town called Nkatabe, which is in the district of Nkatabe. And the majority population of the Nkatabe district are Tonga people. And so I'm going to show you just some dance practices of the Tonga people. And to connect to what Angela was talking about, I'm really going to emphasize the idea of adaptability. So this is true of a lot of different Malawian ethnic groups and across the continent, is each ethnic group has different dances that they do for very particular reasons. So there's a dance that young men do for competition. There's ones that young women do. There's ones that adult women do. There's ones that are done for healing. There's ones that's done to celebrate. There's ones that kids do to learn things. And there's all different kinds of dances. So these dances exist, but they're not, as with a lot of traditions, they're dynamic and they're adaptable. So people can change them and use and make them work for different kinds of settings. So I'm going to focus on 3 different dance forms, and I'm going to show you some short clips, again from my own research documentation, some short clips of dancing in the same dances in different contexts. So I'm going to start with dancing in an inter-village dance competition. I'll explain what that is. In a tourist lodge that caters to young white backpackers, at the installation of a chief, and then at 2 different political rallies. And I did a lot of my research on dance in the formal political sphere. So I should have this big. So, so the first 2 dance forms I'm going to show you are these inter-village dance competitions. So this is this thing that's kind of like soccer. Soccer is huge in Malawi, so it's not instead of soccer. This happens alongside soccer. In the Katabe district, there's these traditions of a village will have a team that dance. There's a boys version and a girls version. So Malipenga is the boys version and Chilimika is the girls version. And the teams will be members, young meaning age kind of 12 to 32 or 35, young members of the youth of the male youth of a village will get together and they practice Malipenga during Malipenga season, like a sport, it has a season, and they come together and they practice a couple times a week. And then when it's competition time, they invite dance teams from other villages to come to their village, and then they host a competition. And it's all very informal. There aren't official judges, though it's very scheduled and very specific sequence of events. And there aren't judges, but there's always a lot of arguing. So one group will say, I won, and the other one will be like, no, I won. And there's all sorts of, lots of competition on this. And these dances are important for, kind of to connect to Carolina, for cultural identity, village identity. So a village will get a lot of pride if they win or they're known to be a good dancer. You'll see in the dress, because it's young people, they're wearing the costumes of the dance, which has a really interesting history, which I won't go into, but I can explain it later if you would like. So they get to show off, they get to dress nicely, they get to show their prowess, and there's a lot of opportunity to pick up, right? So you're bringing together a bunch of guys from different villages, you're bringing them to your village. Good opportunity for the young lasses in the village to meet some of these guys from the other villages. There are lots of stories in the Katabe district about, oh yes, I was a great Malipenga dancer, I met my wife at Malipenga. So I'm going to show you a short clip, and I put this together really quickly, so I'm just going to show you some kind of random clippage, really. This is of a Malipenga competition that I saw probably in October 98 or so. And I'll pause it. I'll keep it low. These dances are thought to, they emerged in their current form during World War II, when Malawians fought in the so there were colonial armies of Malawians who were fighting, so the Malawian army, Malawi was a British colony, and Tanzania to the north was a German colony, so during World War I, there was military action going on in Africa. So the Malawian army, which was fighting for the British, was fighting the Tanzanian army, which was fighting for the Germans. Now, the Tanzanians and Malawians didn't have anything against each other. It was just the colonial powers that were at war. And so the story goes that so there was a lot of kind of irony in their fighting in these wars. So apparently the different ethnic groups were in units together, and during their breaks, like in the evenings and stuff, they still had their military uniforms. And so they developed these dances that kind of parody the military. So I don't know if you saw this, but the dancers are in row and column formation. They're wearing shorts and shirts. When they have them, they have shirts with epaulets. These people can't afford that. They have, what's it called? The black kind of there's a term for it, the kind of half sock thing that you put on your shin. And their dancing is in a marching-like step, but it's this exaggerated, slow marching step. And part of the thing with the Tonga, they live near the lake, and cleanliness is a really huge value. And so one of the things they say is they developed this dance move because it's a marching-like step, but it's chameleon style. So that, and they're dancing in the dust, so they're not going to get dirty while they do it. And so there's a lot of pride, and they've always had their handkerchiefs, and they're wiping their feet. I would walk across the way and just be covered in dust. So it was pretty amazing, their abilities. So this is the female version of it. And this is actually, the history of this is it was copied on the Malipenga. So even though it's women who wouldn't have fought in the wars, they're in the row column formation. You can see the play on the marching. You can see the skirt and blouse. They're all wearing kind of some of their best clothes. And then the whistles is like a military thing. And their drum is a drum that's beat on the side. And so as people are dancing, one of the parts of this tradition is that if they're dancing really well, people come in and give money. And that's one of the ways you know that you've won the competition, if people come in and give you a lot of money. And that'll come in and be relevant. So those are the first two dances. The third dance is called Chiwoda. And it's performed mostly by adult women. It's a circle dance. It's very common across the country. So every ethnic group kind of has its version of the women's circle dance. And it's danced at weddings. It's danced at political rallies. It's danced when somebody comes to the town to welcome. It's not danced nearly as much as it used to be, but it's a very adaptable dance. And the singing, and this was at a tourist lodge of white backpackers who weren't nearly as interested in the dance as the people that came with these women. But I wanted to show you a context, just kind of yet another context. So this connects to what you were talking about in terms of tourism. This is seen as an opportunity to make money. And there's no contextualization, so the people who come don't really know what it is that they're seeing. Their song says, Wana Wana Wasukulu, children, children of school, children, children of the hospital. So the next clip is Chiwoda, again, the same dance that performed at the installation of a chief. So this is more of a ritual setting. So they had the whole ritual of the installation of the chief when he's wrapped in a ceremonial cloth. That's the last step in the ritual. And then they had some other stuff happen, and then they had dancing. And so you see adult women. Unlike the chilimika, the adult women always wear the long cloth wrapped around in what's called a chitenje. And this is a kind of dance that is very easy to join in. I can even join in, though everybody laughs at me. But the idea is that it's fairly, you don't have to practice. It's call and response. So if you don't know the song, if you understand how call and response works, you can just join in the response line pretty easily. And it's easily adapted to different contexts because the words can easily be changed. So in this case, the song might be saying something great about this chief. The same song can be sung about a politician or about somebody that's coming to a home. And just the name of the person could be changed. So now we're going to switch, and I'm going to talk a little bit about political rallies. So in the research that I did, I was looking at how dance is used in the political arena. And these same dances that you saw in these kind of more village contexts are very commonly performed at political rallies. And when they're performed at political rallies, they're performed basically to celebrate and advertise the politician, and also because, as every politician told me, who would come to a political rally if there's not dance? So they make sure to have dancers at the rally, because then people want to go, because it's fun to go and watch dance. As a lot of people said, who wants to listen to me talk? They'd much rather see Malipenga. They'd much rather see Chilimika. So what's interesting is the dances are very easily adapted to the political context, and it fits into a tradition of adapting dances for all different kinds of contexts. And I was saying the lyrics change. With the men, their costumes stay the same, and their lyrics sometimes change and sometimes don't. With the women, and this is a lot of what my research has been, incorporate symbols of the political party to help advertise the party, and then their lyrics are always advertising the party. So they might take a song, for example, in a Chilimica competition. Each team will have songs, for example, that really glorified themselves. So just like the ducks, right? You guys have all sorts of chants about the ducks and how the ducks are great. So a Chilimica team from Malemba is going to have a song lyric about, you've come to Malemba, we in Malemba, we're the best, we're going to knock your socks off. We've been to America, we've been on airplanes, we've been to Japan, they loved us. So you can take that same song and say, oh, today we have come to this political rally. We are here to see Aleke Banda. He is the best. He went to, he's so good that he went to America. He went on an airplane. He went to Japan. So you take the same song, and instead of glorifying your team, now you're glorifying the politician. Does that mean that the dancers really give a hoot about the politician? Maybe, maybe not. It's not. It's more that that's the tradition. And so the politicians use these dances very much to their benefit. But it's a really complicated relationship, which is what I'm interested in, but I won't go too much into it. I just wanted to kind of show you it. So one of the things that happens when they perform at political rallies, this is also when they perform in tourist venues and in other things, is some things about the form of the dance change. So when you saw, this is a different team, so this is a different uniform. Their costume is different. But at the competition, they march in a row column formation around there's usually a mango tree in the middle, and they're marching around. When they're at a political rally, they march into the arena for dancing, and then they just face the politician. And so the whole kind of communal aspect and the moving around and just what that means in terms of the dance form changes, because now they're just marching in place, which is restrictive and limiting. But it also gives there's a whole power communication about the politician gets the best view. And I would often be placed with the politician so I could get a good view with my camera. So I can't hear all the lyrics, but they're singing about this political rally was for Aleke Banda. And they're saying Adona, Adona, which is referring to him. But you can see it's much more static. Like the little clip you saw in the village was much more dynamic. There were tons of people. There was a lot of activity. So this is Chilimica. This is the one where the skirts and blouse that you saw where they were going in the row and column formation. So you see here they're wearing, the color of the UDF is golden blue, and they're wearing, that fabric is UDF fabric, and they were given that fabric to make those skirts, and they were given, the hats are also hats that are part of the propaganda of the political party. So listen, they're saying 90-90, and then they say Awina. So 90-90 is 1999, and this was the campaign for re-election for 1999. So their song is 90-90, we're gonna win, 90-90. So if you listen carefully, you might hear it. And this is a very popular melody that you hear at a lot of Chilimica competitions. So they've just taken it and adapted it. Okay, so this third one is Chiwura. So this is the one that the adult women dance in the circle formation, same political rally. And they're in full party regalia. So they have the t-shirts of the party, the full skirt, real way of advertising the party, makes the party look like they have a lot of support. So Azimai is women, women, women will vote, women, women, women will vote. So Azimaiwa UDF, UDF is the party, the women of UDF. Okay, so the next one, this was a really elaborate rally that I just showed you, but this last example is at a rally for the then president, Bakili Muluzi. So he's the incumbent in the elections, and so he came up to the north. He's not popular in the north at all, but he held this huge rally in the north, and the committee of the political party worked really hard to bring in a lot of people to dance. So I just want you to kind of think about what happens in the village, and then there's the smaller political rally, and then there's this huge political rally. And especially in the last example, there's like the Chihuahua example, there's lots and lots and lots of women all dancing together. And so just think about the energy. Again, think about being at a football game, and you're at a football game, and there's thousands of fans, and everybody is yelling and screaming, "Go Ducks, go Ducks." And the idea of bringing together a lot of women together in the full party regalia and singing about singing and promotion of the politician does a lot to kind of mobilize support, get people excited, make it look like he has a lot of support. And so as you're watching this, remember that he doesn't actually have a lot of support in the north. So this is all very much a performance of support. So that's Bakili Muluzi, who's known for a lot of corruption and not eradicating poverty. In his speech is saying, I use this clip because it's a little bit in English, he's saying, "I'm coming up here to tell you I'm going to eradicate poverty." Altogether. Yay, we love you. Sorry, I got a little involved here. So this is Malipenga. So look how, it's kind of far away, but look how elaborate that performance, the group really, they found groups that had the resources to have much better uniforms. They have a drum that's an actual, like factory-made drum as opposed to the locally made one. And then this is a really big group of women. And if you were in there, I mean, even if you were there and you just joined them, you would get goosebumps. I mean, you would start feeling that you would like that guy, Bakili Muluzi, a whole lot, even if you didn't know who he was, just because you're in the throng and drawn up in it. We love technology. And this is one of maybe 12 groups of women who danced Chihuahua at this event. And here, so remember I told you in the Chilimica contest that if people like the way somebody is dancing, they come in and they give a little money, and it's a token, and it's a way of showing appreciation. Watch what happens. So these were women, high-level women that just went to join them as a symbolic, we are all women, we're dancing with you, even though there's a huge class divide. And now all of these men and women descend from the VIP stand and they enter the throng. There's a lot more coming. That's more women kind of doing the symbolic joining. And they're just singing Boma e Boma, which is government, government, so they can come at president. There they are, all the men in suits. Think about the men in suits versus the women in garment. And see the guy in orange over there? That's the president. So the president himself is entering into this throng of dancing women. All of these men in suits. Like, it's really striking, the difference in dress. And they're going to enter in, and they're going to give some money to show their appreciation, a token of appreciation, but a lot of people thought they were really trying to buy votes. There's the president coming out. So I don't want to take very much more time, but I just wanted to show you one more example. I had a couple more examples, but I'll just show you the one. Oops. This is the Church of Central Africa, it's the Presbyterian Church of Malawi, and they have a women's organization within the church, and they wear outfits with the church colors and the church symbol, and they get together, and part of what they do is sing and dance, and their singing and dancing is very similar to the Chihuahua. Here they're dancing in place because they're indoors, but they often do outdoor things, and they dance in the same circle formation. So my friend, colleague Clara Henderson and I wrote an article comparing the political dancing to the dancing in the church. And their songs, in the same way, their songs, they'll have some of the same songs where there's a song praising Jesus that they sing in this context, and then they sing the similar song praising a politician. Not the same group, but the same women will dance with a political group, and they sing a similar song, sometimes with the same melody, praising a politician that in the church context. So it's, again, the adaptability of this genre of praise singing. So I will stop there so that we have some time for questions.
Showing us, it seemed like the women were a lot more, I think there was a lot more movement in the women's dances than the men's dances, and I was wondering if there's a reason for that, or that's just a sample.
It's just a sample. There's so many different dance forms, and each one that has very different movements, and you're seeing kind of this tiny clip from afar. So yeah, the whole gendering, the whole idea of dance as being a female thing is a really European idea. So, I mean, men and women both dance. They dance different dances. There's some that they dance together, but a lot of the men's dances have a lot of movement. In fact, some Malawians would say the opposite. The women dance these really kind of subdued dances, whereas we do this kind of more dramatic stuff. So, yeah.
Do the politicians pay them to do the dances?
So that's the tricky issue. So they don't, because it's the tradition. So if you ask, when they're criticized a lot for this. But now, so oddly enough, I don't know, like a month ago, the president of Malawi died very suddenly. And he happened to have a vice president who he had fallen out with rather dramatically and was not kind of nurturing towards the presidency. But the Constitution says the vice president gets to be the president, so the vice president gets to be the president, and lo and behold, the vice president is a woman. So Malawi beat the US by far, and it's the second country in Africa to have a woman president. And what's really interesting, I was just looking at images last night, that one of the things I looked at were women politicians, because women politicians also have women dancing for them in these ways, and so the practice persists, even though there's a woman. So anyway, you were asking about the money, but this whole thing is interesting. And so what people say is that we're just following the tradition. These people come to our rallies because they want to. It's a tradition that people dance whenever there's a public event, and if they're happy, they dance, and they come to show us their happiness. And we just give them some money, but that's just tipping the way you would at a Chilimika festival. That's why I made that comparison. If somebody is dancing, well, you show them a little token of your appreciation. But what was happening in that election, especially, and what's continued to happen, is the politicians don't pay them, don't hire them, but they organize them to come, and they know that if they go, then they'll get some money. And so you're talking about a country where there's a lot of poverty, and so if people will spend their whole day going to a political rally, sometimes because they support the politicians, and sometimes because they hope for some payment. This political rally, they gave out thousands of dollars. And a lot of them, women might go home like with a bag of sugar, like a pretty small item. So the kind of exploitative nature of it is pretty huge. Look, questions for these two, since we've left all the questions, Sylvia. I had a question for you. You were talking conceptually about what your dances, kind of who you would include and what kinds of things you would want to communicate. I'm wondering what kinds of movements and aesthetics you're thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm said that I'm gonna use the postmodern way of contemporary dance, which means that it's hybrid in form and content, I guess. So it's kind of putting a little bit of everything, but in thinking in how to fuse these two vocabularies, or maybe more that I was saying, like my Latin dance background, but also maybe look into like some African dances. We offer some African dances at the department, so I'm interested in maybe researching more what happens in those classes. I have taken just one, and then they also like focus on certain parts of Africa and certain dances, and then of course ballet would be also like some. I mean, modern here the department is is focused on modern, and then the ballet classes that we take are geared towards like the modern vocabulary, which is. But then what I'm saying is going a little bit more beyond and push that, because the modern vocabulary is still pretty much very in my mind, it's still very formal and linear and classic. It tends to be a little bit classic. So I'm more interested in playing even with theatrical elements and kind of adding. I guess that what I'm trying to say, the postmodern element will be also to include real situations into the dance performance. So I'm interested maybe in using some costumes, maybe some stories from the movies that I read about in the book, or for example, another thing has been like the whole cosmetic world, like how to change these brown bodies so it looks more white in certain contexts, because it's better to look more white in certain contexts, or how if it's too white then maybe we want a little bit black or darker, So so maybe playing with all of those elements, it would come like something very unique, I hope. I guess that's my aesthetic, like maybe taking a little bit of reality and also a little bit of the performative world of what it is like to perform for a dance theater, because it's not a real situation where it's like when you offer workshops with people with disabilities, for example, it's another context and it's more about like what is just happening in that moment. But I'm aware that that would be like to show something and it would be performing at dance theater, so it would be a little bit different. But yeah, I'm interested in using different elements. Yeah, and then text is also another element that we can use, or that dancers are using more often. So it's. Yeah, and then the idea also of the postmodern way of thinking of dance, or the logic of postmodern in dance, it's to kind of being very mobile and like never really like trying to say anything too aesthetic or So I think that's what I like, that maybe in the language you kind of have to complete the sentence and make it logic and and then maybe in dance we can find other ways to express that are more maybe non-logical, or
have it more complicated.
yes,
Yeah.
or in a different dimension, I guess. Yeah.
I had a question for Angela. And it seemed that while you were doing your presentation, you kind of alluded to other parts of dancing. I was just curious, what other dances you studied and what other parts of that you got into?
Do you mean in terms of like my personal study, or in terms of my research?
Personal study.
Well, just from my my background, I did like some modern dance and stuff throughout high school and whatnot, and drill team and different things like that. And then when I moved to Eugene, I actually started a performance troupe here, and we did kind of like vaudeville type things, and we were really looking at like ways of kind of playing with representations of women specifically, and we also worked with some transgendered people, and just finding different ways to kind of play with the kind of assumptions about what kind of constitutes, I guess, performance and what is attractive. How that led me to Africa is kind of random. I've always been into dance, and I've also been into representation, and that, like, what I found so interesting about Carolina's piece is that, taken from the kind of subject position, is how do you represent yourself in the context of like how others perceive you. And that was kind of what I was looking at in my performances. What is expected of a female body or a male body, and how can we play with that in representation? And then in terms of what I've looked at in Mali is, what do tourists expect of an African performance, and how do those in the local context kind of respond to that, and what do they recognize as African? And it's pretty interesting because the Touareg are very, they're kind of in this in-between place where they're by the people in the south, they're called Arab. And by the north, they're kind of glommed together with sub-Saharan Africans. And when I traveled in 2005 to the festival in the desert, a lot of the people that I went with in my group were there was this ongoing joke, like, when will we get to Africa? Because there was this idea that there was an Africa, and they were in an African nation. So when was Africa signaled to them? And I think that has to do with what Lisa talked about in terms of what do, say, Americans look for or understand as African. And so those kind of relate, I guess, different kinds of performance that I've done and what I assume the audience wants, and then looking at kind of how does an African performer, do they identify as African? Do they identify as Malian? Do they identify as Touareg? And what I learned is kind of yes and no in all of those cases.
Well, thanks to all of you for coming on just a sunny day. It was funny watching everybody play football and jump around on their bikes. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.